Yes, welcome back.
All right, man. So I just wanted to pop the recording on because we're chatting about something that's pretty important, and also something that's actually been coming up a lot with our more startup clients and the people we've been speaking to. And I can definitely say that, we've been through it before ourselves. So I'd love to obviously share it with everybody else as well. And it's around the concept of getting outside money into your business. And so what that really looks like, what it actually means maybe in reality, and the potential risks associated. So I think when we started out ourselves, we put in a chunk of money with us. We had some startup cash that we actually put in, that we had obviously in savings, that we put into the business as like a pool that we could obviously get from for stock and produce and everything that we had to do to sort of pay up front. And then once we had the wheels turning, we were able to, I guess, fund it. And that, if I recall, like that wasn't super calculated. I think you, with your accounting background, had calculated like 70K was what we kind of started with. I don't even know where that number came from. Do you remember how you actually calculated that number about putting that much money into, as an investment initially?
I think we looked at some machinery from the States, and that was about 50 grand. And so it was based on CapEx requirements, and then the rest we were going to cash flow fund. I think that's what it was.
Yeah. Okay.
And a bit of a buffer for operating expenses, but generally we'd worked it out to cash flow fund most of our working capital requirements.
Yeah. And then what do you reckon? So we got that going. Obviously we're going for maybe probably 12 months. And I guess even for you as kind of the big visionary of the business, like looking at outside money was always on the cards. I mean, when people kind of think about it, and people in that startup phase as well, they just kind of like, okay, I need money to do these huge grand plans like really quickly. That was probably what it was for me and for us initially. But I mean, it can get a little bit more complicated than that. But like, what did you think when we're looking for outside money? Like what did you sort of initially think? I mean, that was me. That was like, okay, smash marketing, get it to market quickly, spend all this money to kind of make all this revenue. That's the idea. But I mean, how were you thinking about it at the time?
Yeah, it was there's two things. It was demand and supply. So obviously you do an element of creating demand, so marketing spend, and then obviously supply. So how are you gonna supply the demand that you're creating? So because we manufacture everything end to end, it meant that we need to factor in more capex to ensure that we can get the demand that we're creating through the marketing spend, and then also an element of operating expenses with the admin staff, support staff, and not losing that customer service element. So it was a combination of manufacturing setup and marketing spend. So it was sort of a two parts to it, really.
Yeah. I mean, I remember definitely having conversations about like, if we had 100 grand or even $1 million, like what would we actually do with it? Do you remember having those conversations?
Yeah. We probably would have started up more retail stuff and spent more money on fit outs and maybe machinery that we didn't need, and probably would have wasted a lot of it, I think, rather than being super niche and super narrow in what we were doing, and then sort of by virtue of necessity focusing on what was generating all of our revenue. That's where we would have burnt the money, I think.
Yeah, because I mean, even something we've spoken about as well before is around like we were obviously on building our business, and it was kind of, we were a couple of steps ahead of, I guess, like this wave. But the risk with moving too fast was that you get too far ahead of that wave and almost outpace it, in the sense of, if that was investment spending, as you say, doing retail, doing this, doing too much too early, it would actually hinder like the organic growth that was kind of coming with bootstrapping it.
Mm-hmm.
And so like that's, I guess, the risk with other businesses who are looking to do the same. They have this grand idea of, yeah, if I just had that much money, I could do this and we could succeed. But like, I often feel in our conversations with other business owners, it's like they think that that's the solution, but really it's not. It's either going to be a quick fix or a quick kind of cash spend for maybe some instant gratification, but longer term probably doesn't put them in good stead. I mean, we assess kind of the risks. We never went down that path. I know there's a couple of instances which we can touch on about possibly why we didn't do that. But like, what do you think the risks are with having too much cash? Like, I've seen it in a couple of our clients actually, where they have too much cash and they're just literally spending money on Facebook ads, Google ads, and they're not profitable, but they feel like they have to keep spending the money to because they have it, versus us in the beginning where it was like, we didn't have the money, so we didn't spend it. So yeah, we really just, as you said, found that niche. But what do you think otherwise, like the potential downsides from an operations perspective? We'll get into the ownership side and decision making, but like operations side that people can fall into the trap of, I guess.
Yeah, well, I think you just hit the nail on the head. I mean, if you're given $1 million, you kind of want to spend it, like, and you end up spending it to justify the requirement for the investment in the first place. But there'd be a lot of wastage. You'd probably waste more than 50% of that on just not stupid decisions, but perhaps less thought out decisions. Like, instead of, you might be able to find a place that you can lease for half the price, but you've got $1 million, so you pay 200 a year instead of a place you only need to spend 100 a year. And like, there becomes a lot of, I would say, higher burn rate of OPEX, and then perhaps purchasing capital items because they're shiny and sexy. And it's like, well, I've got $1 million cash, so I might as well buy it. It's like, yeah, but you don't need that.
I do remember. Yeah. Well, a couple of our competitors, for example, they went out and bought like fancy new like delivery vehicles, for example, which might have been on the cards for us even in the beginning. And I think that's probably another thing, is like your priorities actually change as you go on.
Yes.
And you have been smarter with your money. It's like a goal that you had one day and you're like, I don't want that anymore. Now I'm there, I don't really want what that bought or whatever. And so in the beginning, we probably could have burnt some stuff on delivery vehicles, which not necessary, and we know, as I say, we know people who did that and bought and leased out retail space, as you said.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's right. I think unnecessary kind of cash. I mean, there's a difference between like having enough to survive and use the money to drive your business and grow your business. Like, that's kind of like the line. And then anything over that is just, excessive, as you say. Like, you'd probably just have better off having it in the bank more than anything initially.
No, for sure. I remember we were looking at, like, if we had had a significant amount of cash, we may have bought a few delivery vehicles, but then it kind of, if you think about where we're at now, it may have actually been a detractor in our growth, because we're then limited by the number of delivery vans we have. Whereas if you partner up with a delivery company, you get access to their scale. You're not limited by your own capital or your own equipment, which you really didn't need in the first place. So you kind of actually start to limit your own growth potential through constraints that you've manufactured because you were given cash that you didn't actually need. And now you find yourself constrained, ironically, by the capital that you took to invest and to grow. So it can be a bit paradoxical. And also, I'd say, like, necessity being the mother of all invention. I mean, if you're a bit strapped for cash, you kind of have to be creative and solutions based. Whereas if you've got a lot of cash, you can become lazy in decision making, and you kind of lose touch with the business and lose touch with what is actually your priority and what you're trying to create. So that's a risk of having too much as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's kind of like the day-to-day operational stuff. And then one thing that I guess didn't hit home until we had been down the line a couple of times was around like even ownership and decision making. And I remember we spoke about, again, around feeling like an employee in your own business. Like, that was a big thing that kind of probably detracted us a few times. As I say, we've been through it a couple of times, but like having that pressure like that responsibility to deliver to somebody else because you're taking their cash. And then, so that's the pressure. And then the second thing is to actually, you know, take shots from them. If they wanted something differently or they thought, you know, differently. And I know you can structure arrangements certain ways, and that's something that we obviously learned, but that's definitely something that wasn't considered in the beginning, is how taking someone else's money, literally, impacts on your attitude to your own business. Like suddenly you feel like you're working for somebody else. I know that was what kind of went through our minds.
Yes. Yeah. No, that's right. Hang on, just bear with me 1 second. I'm just going to get off Wi-Fi so we've got a better connection. And then should be through now.
I'll just sit here and wait.
I gotcha. Yeah, no, you got it. I'm good. You good?
Yeah, your video's not on there.
Oh man. Now?
Nope.
You on?
Yeah, good now. Oh no, you had it before. Now you're mute. Yeah, it's good.
Should be on now.
Yeah, it's good now. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that. I mean, that's probably a good case in point. I mean, we've been going for a decade, and I still don't have hardline internet. We're still going off a hotspot. So
yeah, you're building another office. So you're expanding the office. So you're off the hook there.
Yeah, but you just do what you need to do. I mean, you don't go out and spend buy a fucking satellite or for internet connection if you don't need it. Like, it's just stupid. Just use next door neighbors. Yeah, you're right. Actually, if you take taking cash, there's that the philosophical or psychological pressures it creates, because then you feel like you have to pay them back, but you literally do have to pay them back in some degree. So yeah, and that in itself can become constraining, because you stop being maybe might take less risk because you're trying to mitigate risk to pay back the debt or whatever, or become. I would say it impedes the sort of pure creative nature of it, but it can be beneficial too, because you get investors that have been there, done that, and can just advise and stay out of the way. But you suppose you just have to be careful with who you go into business with. I guess they're not all the same.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest thing. Definitely. I mean, because a lot of people say, I just want to get some money, don't really care where it's from. And that's right, they fall into a trap. Either the investor has ulterior motives, or they can come in and boom or bust it, really. But definitely, like, psychologically, for the business owner that's created something, that was another thing, was like the idea of giving away part of your baby, really, because you've got such an attachment to something you've built. And it's almost like hedging as you're going through it. It's like, we could use a bit more cash, but the upside is like, it's almost like you're almost there. Like I used to say, when you're 90% there, you're almost 50% there, because you've almost broken through the hardest bit, where you've got some social proof, you've got some proof of concept in your market, you've got some runs on the board, and the wheels are like turning, but you potentially could see a use for a bag of cash to propel it forwards. It's always like a bit of and it's never like a perfect moment to be able to get that, even now, if, like, obviously circumstances are different, but if you had 10x that amount of cash in the bank, like, you'd almost be like, oh, okay, I wouldn't even necessarily know what to do with it all. You'd still have the same, your attitude doesn't necessarily change, or the circumstance. Like we always said, that the bigger you grow, the problems don't go away, the problems get different, or bigger, at least.
Yeah, like kids.
Yeah. And so what do you reckon is the, I mean, I suppose to anybody sort of like listening to this, like, what are the circumstances you'd actually get investor funding? And then, potentially, like, what would you do with it if that was the case?
Yeah, well, obviously it's case by case. I don't know if you're talking about specifically getting cash for Karmic now. I don't think that's not really how I interpreted the question. Was it more like if, like, a completely different business, or like?
Yeah, different business. I mean, something that can relate to, like our clients, for example, where, they're considering it, because the question does come up. Should I get outside of funding? When should I get outside of funding?
Yeah.
What should I do with the
Well, I
money?
think, yeah. Well, yeah, it's a good question. I mean, well, one thing is to consider is that it's not as easy as just putting your hand out and getting cash. I mean, getting investment is epic, man. So, and you have to be careful and take your time and do due diligence. So that's one part of it. The other part is, well, what are your actual problems and what are you trying to fund and how much funding do you need? And that will dictate the answer. I mean, if you're just getting, I think like entrepreneurs or business owners who are just starting out, I think they think that cash is the be all and end all and will solve all their problems. And it's almost a lazy way of, oh, if I just got $1 million, the business would be successful and I'd be,
Yeah, it's not revenue from sales. So like,
yeah. Or yeah, like, because I can do this and I can do that and then I'll make it. And it's kind of like, well, is that true? It might be, but is it? And then being a bit more critical in how they go about it. But on the flip side, it can make a lot of sense if you really need cash to get specific capital items and you can't fund it from elsewhere and it's going to be too slow to cash flow fund it, then that's fine. And just look at the minimum amount you need and maintain the maximum amount of equity. And, maybe there's other ways you can do it. Like maybe you can get debt funding. There's many reasons why you would consider investment. I mean, one would have to be the soft attributes that the investment brings, or the investor brings over and above the cash. So, if they're a mentor, if they've been in industry for a long time and they can show you the ins and outs and show you the ropes, well, that's going to be beneficial. And that's a real business partner. But if you're just literally wanting cash and working capital, then I would explore other options first, unless they can contribute in a coaching way or a mentoring way or a industry specific way. Or if it's really risky from the start, like if you want seed capital based on an idea and like, oh, I need 500K just to get started. I mean, that's very high risk for the investor, pretty low risk for the business owner, because if it goes bust, it goes bust and that's it. So it depends what cycle you're at as well. Like you're saying, if you've put in 5 years, proven the concept, proven it, got 10,000 clients, then it might not be the best way to go about it, unless you're trying to go internationally, and depends how much you need. It all depends on many variables. But I think just don't go into investment thinking it's going to be like the be all and end all kind of. Yeah, it seems a lot more, say, kind of sexy than it actually is. When in reality, it's really unsexy, because you're selling something that you've made to start answering to someone else who didn't start the business in the first place. So you have to be a little bit cautious.
Yeah, totally.
That's some things to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. You did. Yeah, you made some good points there. That you need to have a specific reason that's got a specific outcome versus I'm just going to do more of the same. Like that's probably a big mistake that people make, is like, I'll just do more of the same, but it's not how it would be better utilized. Same thing with like our 10x rule. Like, unless you're going to make 10x off that cash that you're actually getting in, don't do it. Basically, you need to be able to see how much more revenue that's going to actually bring in and have a specific use for it. Like literally categorizing almost every dollar for that investment. Otherwise, you'll find ways to just blow it, basically.
Exactly. That's true.
Yeah.
And it's, as we say, it's case by case. Different businesses, different lifestyle, different life cycles of businesses. Like, especially if it's owner operated, and like the owner's working 100 hours a week, not getting paid for it, then how do you quantify that, and how do you start to reconcile those things, as opposed to, say, silent investors who don't do any work, or if you're the owner of the business and start to step away and you don't have to do any hands-on stuff, then it becomes a more equitable transaction. So just have to be careful of case by case scenarios and where the owner operator or the owners are at, and where they want to be at. That's that I think, because one of the concerns you and I had was we were working like 80 hours, 100 hours a week for 5, 6, years like straight, and then just have an investor come in and take 45% or whatever of it and do nothing, but then get 45% of the upside, which we were confident we could get. It just didn't make any sense to be like, well, how about you pay us 400K to try and get there, but at the end of the day, we're still going to have, and they're not going to do that. So yeah, it becomes it's literally a business deal and a negotiation of risk and reward, and effort and reward as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably a good point actually, because like for investors, it is very much a transaction where it's so much more emotional for the business owner, and like the right and wrong people, as we say, is super important. But because it's a transaction to them and there's no emotion to it, they're more likely to make you feel like it's not worth as much as what it potentially is, but certainly not what it's worth to you. And so when they negotiate, because they've had experience as well, they're very good at influencing how your business isn't worth that much, or the upside isn't as much as what you think it might be. And so people tend to maybe get a raw end of the stick with the deals sometimes.
Yeah. Look, but I think, like, in fairness, like, I would say that it is a risky deal. I mean, like, and that's where the magic of the entrepreneur founder comes in, because they're the one that have to use their own will force and energy to get it up to that blue sky valuation. But frankly, most businesses 9 times out of 10 go out of business within the first 2 years or something, so it is very, very risky, and the probability of failure is very, very high. So I'm not sure that, like, the investors are in the wrong trying to structure a deal. They're probably more rational. It's just how much belief the entrepreneur has in his or her own ability to create what they think that they can create, and then bet on themselves to do it. And if you don't want to bet on yourself, that's fine. But you're just going to, as you said, take a lower valuation and understand that it's a risky deal for anyone. But if you want to take the risk and get unlimited upside and keep it all yourself, then do it. But you're not going to get an investor coming in saying, "Oh, your business is worth 10x what you're doing now because I believe in you." Like, I doubt it.
Yeah,
it's very rare.
Even if they thought it was, they wouldn't say it.
Yeah, because the risk of, like, just general life risk, man. Like, so stuff can happen to people all the time. Like, it's just too much random stuff that can happen. So yeah, it is, and that's why there's such a detachment between where the founder is and the investor is. They're way off in terms of risk appetite and like what they're prepared to do to make the business succeed. And the hard part is aligning those to be on the same page and get in the middle to do a deal where everyone feels like they're winning.
Yeah. So what do you reckon, like, I mean, just to kind of wrap up this convo at least, what do you think the deciding factors were for us? We mentioned we've kind of been through it at least 2-3 times, maybe gotten close on one occasion at least, but what do you think? I mean, what do you think?
We got pretty far down the track. I mean, we had like shareholder agreements pretty much written up and going through lawyers and stuff. I think it came down to us where we just couldn't align on the value of the business. Like, I think, and like what I just said, the investors thought it was worth probably a quarter or a half of what we thought it potentially could get to, with a high level of probability, given we'd already done 5 years of really hard work. I mean, if they had have come in with a more, I don't know, like, aligned valuation, then perhaps we would have considered it, but it just didn't seem like giving away half of the business for essentially what I at least probably thought was a bit of an offensive amount was something we didn't want to go through with. But in fairness to the investors, like, we didn't have the revenue at that time to justify valuation anyway. So it came down to you and I just saying, look, like I just said, we believe in this. We can see where the trend is going, and we're just going to back ourselves. And what comes. But that's pretty much where we got to. And then ironically, 2 years down the track, when you've got the numbers to justify the valuation that you thought it would have been anyway, you don't need them anymore because you've got such a high net profit margin because you're not paying any debt or distributing dividends. You've got enough cash. It's like, well, I made more cash last year than you were going to invest for half the business, so like, I'll just do that again. Like, and that's where it becomes really difficult. And there's different stages of investing, obviously, like seed and pre-seed, and then, you know, venture capital, like Series A, Series B, and blah, blah, blah. But you've got to get the valuation right, and you've got to get the shareholdings right. Because you don't want to be in a position where you give away half your business for, I don't know, 10, 20, 30, 40, 100 grand. And then 2 years later, it's worth 10 times that. And you're giving away half your profits, and, you know, so
yeah,
it all depends where you're at.
Which is exactly how the investor sees it. It's like, yeah, I'm looking at 10x on
of course.
100, because that's what they're betting on. And from their perspective, you know, kind of the old Tim Ferriss talking about it, like, and this is kind of Silicon Valley stuff, but like they would bet on, say, 10 businesses, all well researched, but they only need one to win and win big, and it makes up for the rest. Like that's kind of almost their strategy in a very sophisticated, I guess, way. So it's not like you want the investors to lose, like, by your business winning or anything like that, or, you know, or you lose with why the business is winning. But I guess that's even an attitude thing, right? Like, if you're doing all the work, that's the agreement you've got, and they're just completely profiting silently, you know, then that's not the right thing to be in business with, right? If you're not sitting well with it. Anyway, that's probably the main thing. You have to sit well and accept the circumstance that you agree on, and be really content with that. You know, otherwise you're just going to be disgruntled for every day that you're working back in your business that, you know, you might end up hating.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. That's it, mate. Well, we might leave it there.
Yeah, leave it there. That was some good info. Hope everyone got some value out of that. But yeah, man, we'll chat about that.
Yeah, we can ask. It's more case by case. So if anyone has specific questions, just put a book in a call or something, and we can talk about it. It's all case by case, but there's more than one way to skin a cat, as they say.
Yeah, easy, man. Good work. I'll chat to you soon.
All right. Yep. Take it easy, man. See ya.